I'm Chris Como, and I'm here with Bryson DeChambeau, and we're exploring another piece of the puzzle.
As you look at the brain stuff, we really don't know how to control any of that. And that's a very difficult avenue to go down. We aren't there in the golf world yet. As we look at a sensitivity to air sort of puzzle, there's a lot of combinations of motions that you can make to take away that sensitivity to air. So you don't have these big, massive shots. And when I look at it from that standpoint of sensitivity to air, it starts to bleed into the biomechanics and the repeatability aspect.
I think these are all very overlapping things, right?
Very much
They're
so.
not mutually exclusive. Like you can have a little bit of all this. And I'm going to guess, again, you know, I need to preface all this, in my opinion, that this is still like some uncharted territory.
100%.
We're basically trying to figure out at a more sort of conscious, maybe even quantified level, what really guys like Lee Trevino, Byron Nelson, Ben Hogan, Mo Norman, great ball strikers, Tiger, figured out. Maybe not even consciously figured it out, but they did it, right?
It just happened based on the environment at hand and some of the stimulus that they haphazardly did or actually consciously did, whether they were trying to accomplish something or not. It just effectively came out to produce a motion that was incredibly repeatable and incredibly consistent.
The gold standard. And I'm just gonna go on a little tangent because like sometimes people ask me, how do you define good or bad in a golf swing? In my opinion, the best ball strikers of all time, that's sort of the definition of it. The way I look at it is, out of all the millions of people who've picked up a golf club, more or less, if any individual could play golf at the highest level on the PGA Tour, they probably would, right? You got the guy who's gonna go cure cancer, make a gazillion dollars or whatever. But for the most part, if you had the opportunity to play on the PGA Tour, you would. So now all of a sudden you have not just the trial and error of, say, Hogan digging out of the dirt or Lee Trevino, you have the collective trial and error out of everybody's picked up a golf club. And then from that massive sample, you get a handful of guys. You get the Trevinos, you get the Hogans, you get the Tigers that kind of come out of that. And to me, there's so much genius in that. Even if it's not conscious genius, there's so much intelligence in that that I feel like, you know, that's where we need to be looking. When people ask me like, okay, you're into science, it's not the science of invention. I'm not trying to invent a golf swing. To me, it's the science of discovery. It's to try to discover at a better detail what these guys figured out, again, maybe unconsciously.
100%.
And I think through that deeper understanding, you have a higher likelihood of recreating that with someone who doesn't currently do that but wants to get there.
Right.
Okay, so anyways.
Absolutely, and I think as we look at it, biomechanics is really the topic of conversation that we've been going down, or Mike and I, we all have been going down to try and understand how can our bodies make motion that allows for one, you know, not being as sensitive to air, and two, repeatability, you know, those sorts of things. This is a long conversation to unveil something called, what I describe as end range of motion potential.
This is one of the common things, because this is like, different languages I always talk about as like anatomical governors.
Right.
You talk about end range of motion, it's like, dude, we're talking about the same thing. That's
100%.
It's pretty cool.
Yes. So we just find different ways to go down that road. And I am a guy that has kind of gone really deep down the anatomical governors or the end ranges of motion. And it's been quite fascinating to see how there's a lineage to the golf swing. There's this process to the golf swing that starts to unveil itself when certain things start to get put at these in-range parameters.
So let's just give them a for instance, because this is so kind of theoretical at this point.
Theoretical.
Okay, so grab a club.
So I have my 7-iron.
Maybe we just do the lead arm, internal rotation versus supination stuff.
100%.
Okay, so I'm gonna describe it to start with, and then you can kind of jump in there if that's right.
Yep.
Okay. Yep. So let's say that a person's baseline is, okay, show impact with external rotation.
So impact with external rotation.
Okay, so when I say external rotation, I'm talking about
this upper forearm.
This upper, the
upper
humerus,
arm,
yep, inside the shoulder. It's externally rotating the shoulder. And we can see that by the crux of his elbow, that underbelly of his elbow. So now, let's just say that for him, the face gets square when the back of his wrist is at the target. So that's his good shot. Swing 1, comes in there, good shot. Swing 2, he goes a little bit more. The back of the wrist is now this way. The face is closed. You hit it left. Swing,
and then vice versa. It's swing 3. This thing is pointed to the right, and it's missed to the right because it directly relates to club face control. So this is going to miss right.
Okay, so now let's take a situation where you're fully internally rotated. Let go of the club for 1 second. Let me see. And now you only have so much range of motion in this forearm going into what we'd call supination, or the external rotation of that forearm to his upper arm. So now all of a sudden, he can't go anymore. So it's like for him, he hits that end range of motion, the face is square, he can't overshoot it.
Yep, so it gets to square, and I literally can't overshoot it. The only thing I could do is go into more wrist, left wrist flexion, right wrist extension,
Yeah,
right?
and then this just becomes finding all these other ways that you can sort of hit end range of motion to create these locks, whether it be face control, maybe some path control, maybe some angle of attack control, maybe some dynamic loft control, whatever it is, the lie angle of it, right? That's some of the ulnar deviation you do.
Yep, so some of this, the ulnar deviation, gets me to an end range potential.
So now all of a sudden, that lie angle stays very consistent.
Yep, very consistent, exactly. If I'm starting here and then I end up here, well, I could end up there, and so you have this lie angle potential deviation of that motion. So to also kind of go back and talk more about this, there's any combination of motion you want to make. You can go be at any, so I can go to this full internal rotated shoulder, right, humerus, and I can go the full external, right, and I can go anywhere in between. That's biomechanics. I have the potential to be anywhere in between that. Then you add the second segment, the forearm essentially, and you can be in full internal to full external rotation of that forearm. So you add this of being in mid-range, and you add this being in mid-range, you can have a combination of pretty much an almost infinite amount of variables that are included in this left arm.
Yeah. And there's so many different, potential examples of this. Even like kind of having the club flattened sort of in vogue right now, right? So if like a guy is somewhat internally rotated in his humerus and he shallows it with just his forearm, the shaft shallows, you hit an end range of motion with that, and it's like now all of a sudden I can only shallow it so much.
Yep.
Or if you hit an end range of motion with external rotation, you can only shallow it so much. So there's all different ways a person can find these end ranges of motion, and this is where I think we still see so many different unique swings, but potentially they're kind of getting to these spots where it's like it's hard for them to overshoot things.
Yep.
And I think one of the things that we do really good with each other and with Mike is we're constantly challenging each other. We're stress testing an idea. It's very easy to have an idea of what should happen in the swing and then cherry pick examples. Finding the guy that proves you right, that's not good science, right? You should be saying, I have a hypothesis and let me try my darnest to find observation to prove it wrong.
Exactly.
Right? And this is to me is where it's like, again, they're not mutually exclusive. Whatever it is, like an idea of you should do this or that.
Sure.
If you think this is something that's important in the swing and you're trying to actually create a theory that can accommodate, that can sort of explain all observation, then you need to be searching for observation that actually proves it wrong.
Disproves it.
Yeah.
Yep, absolutely. And so for me, when I came back, this is, kind of wrapping it up a little bit with that. When I came back from the British Open missing the cut by a million, I was like, I got to change something. After I missed Tour Championship, went back to the tent back at Mike's place, and I essentially said to Mike, I got to find a way to be more repeatable. I can't go out and win a tournament and then miss a cut the next week. That just does not work for me anymore. I need to be way more repeatable. So I started looking at DJ, Dustin Johnson, for example, and Jordan Spieth actually. So I started realizing, there's some good ball strikers doing some really weird things. And also holding the left elbow out like Jordan Spieth. This elbow is pointing towards the target. And so I started doing this stuff, and I started realizing quickly that I couldn't ever hit it left by going to the max end range of upper and internal rotation. You
can only supinate this form so much.
Yeah, I can't go anymore.
Yep.
And this can override it. And so essentially, I never, in doing this completely through the shot, never hit a shot left. It was literally impossible for me to miss it left. It's just the faces. I may have hit it 30, 40 yards right, but I'd never missed it left.
Or if you hit it left, it's maybe from something else. Maybe you open up too quickly with your body or flip it that way.
You could relatively, do that, but it was very, it was almost impossible to do with my normal golf swing.
Because someone's going to look up your strokes gained shot pattern and be like, no, you hit a shot left here, so you just gotta be careful.
I know, yeah, and it happens. There's other reasons why it happens.
Right.
It doesn't mean that it's foolproof or anything like that. This is where I went from being, top 100 player in the world to now I'm a top 10 player in the world in the span of 3 or 4 months. And I felt it too. It was like once I started doing this and building, I'm like, man, I can do this every single day, every single week, every single month for the rest of my life. Watch the season premiere of Swing Expedition with me, Mike Shy, and Chris Como, Monday night at 7 on Golf Channel.